Sega Saturn SHIRO.
Sega Saturn SHIRO.
Turn your mic on.
Damn it.
Love Patrick.
Damn it. Okay, all right. We're going to start over. Hey, everybody. It's Friday. I'm Saturn Dave, and I've got an empty couch here, but we've got Cardboard Pat to join us, and everybody will be helping out doing voiceover for Pat. I'm getting a bunch of errors from YouTube, is what I was saying. YouTube is yelling at me, barking at me about the stream bitrate, and even though it says I have an excellent connection, so who knows? Who knows? If the stream gets borked, I apologize. But yeah. So yeah, I'm flying solo wing this week, pun intended. And I've got who do I have in the Discord chat right now? I think we got Knight of Dragon and Dr. Emerald Nova.
Yeah, no one important.
Hanging out. No one important except for two of our patron supporters. I would say you guys are pretty important. Let's see here. Okay, so we don't have a lot of news this week. It's been a slow news week, and also Pat is out of town, so we're just going to be kind of flying by the seat of our pants and shooting the shit about Saturn, and hopefully folks share the stream. That would be.
If you want, we could just like read through the press kit if you really wanted to.
That actually is kind of that was the general plan. Is we have a couple of posts that are related to like game history preservation, so I figured we would just roll with that, you know, and go through and kind of check stuff out and talk about our thoughts about it. And then I did actually have a couple of items that I was gonna maybe bring out for show and tell, just so I had some extra content to throw at you guys. But more than anything, oh, go ahead.
Are we doing Home Saturn Network again?
Home Saturn Network? Well, none of this stuff is for sale, but yeah, no, I can demo it for you. No, yeah, Pat's Home Saturn Network. That was a blast. I don't think that I could top that, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't have any pre-fund printers though to show you guys. But yeah, no, I mean, last show, you know, we capped it off talking about the Hitachi Wide Boy TV there. So since then, we've really only had two articles. One that I snapped up today regarding an earlier series of videos that I posted earlier in the week. So, but yeah, the big story here is that Peter Malik, one of our fellow Shiros, he reached out to us in a private message months ago, and he was like, "Oh, guess what I just bought on eBay?" And I think he got it for like around $500 or something like that. Was this E3 Sega Saturn Press Kit from 1995? And this is I would say that some of these materials are available here and there on the internet, not all together like this, not in a cohesive package. And I mean, there are other press kits out there, I'm sure, in people's collections, but Peter wanted to buy this just so that he could take pictures of it and scan it and preserve it for the community to enjoy. So as somebody who's like all about game history preservation, and I'm kind of more of a nut of game history than even playing games at this point, I really appreciate Peter's efforts to do this. And yeah, so I was just going to take you guys through it and show you like what it consisted of. Essentially, you had each... so E3 1995 was the first E3. It was the infamous E3 where Sega rushed the Saturn's launch, and also Sony kind of, put in their comment of $299 to kind of shut them down. And that ended up being the big news there, is that Sony undercut Sega by like $100 on the price. But it also was an E3 that was only open to the press. So this was back before, general public could attend. And I don't know if all of the members of the press, but many members of the press were given this press kit, consisting of a soft briefcase, a Head for Saturn poster, as well as the E3 Highlights VHS cassette. You had this brochure, this like pamphlet brochure, and a lot of the visual design language is matching that of the Sega Saturn Choice Cuts CD that a lot of people will be familiar with if they happen to have a copy of that. And apparently it actually came with a Choice Cuts demo disc. I thought Peter had just put that there, but that's cool. So members of the press were able to play a demo if they went out and bought a Saturn, I guess, or if they were like given a Saturn at whatever agency they worked for. You had here's a press badge from E3. That's pretty cool. It's got a PlayStation sticker on it though. That's kind of funny. And then of course you had a binder here, itemized with sections for Sega Saturn, Genesis 32X, Sega CD. You had let's see, Game Gear. You had Pico, I guess, in the back. But Saturn was front and center, and the whole binder was branded with Sega Saturn. So that's cool. And what this consisted of is, according to the table of contents, it is too small for me to read. So I'm just gonna scroll down and we'll go line by line. Are you guys? Did you guys have any thoughts on this? Have you guys seen these on eBay? Or was this like new?
On eBay, no. I'm pretty sure the Choice Cuts has been ripped at some point. I don't know if I have it loaded up on CD
I don't
or
doubt.
not.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. It's pretty common. But yeah, I've seen one other press kit like this show up on eBay at one point. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in the community that we know has it or has part of it. It's pretty cool that Peter was able to snag this, because it's only going to become more rare. So I mean, I think that is well worth it. And the first this is interesting. One of the first documents talks about consumer demand, and I mean, okay, you gotta maintain this perspective of, okay, they're talking to press, members of the press. And it's kind of like this whole press kit, I think, is classic because I don't know if Sony did anything like this, but Sega had so much documentation. They had so many white pages just kind of like telling the press how to think, or they're like, this is how you should think about what the Saturn is going to be. It's like, rather than letting folks kind of decide for themselves, they're like telling you where consumer demand is, So that's what I was going to ask about, is the way they're written. Are you supposed to like read that off verbatim if you're like a Tech TV announcer or something? Well, no, I would imagine that if you were a dutiful, press agent, you were somebody, a staff writer for a magazine or maybe a website. Back then, that was pretty early days for websites. But I imagine that if you, were the kind of writer who scrubbed through this kind of stuff thoroughly, you would take quotes from here and there, or you would use this to inform your article on like where Sega was going with their product line and stuff like that. So, some of the white page, when I and we'll get to that when we read the white pages, a lot of it sounds like it's almost written with like stockholders in mind, or like investors in mind, because that's what the trade show is for, isn't it? Like originally it's supposed to be for actually shareholders. Well, CES definitely was, and of course you had I think that a lot of shareholders would have attended E3 or been invited to that first E3, but again, these press kits I think were given mostly to members of the press. So honestly, I can't exactly, without talking to like Tom Kalinske or which we have, but we didn't have time to really talk about this. We had very limited time. I'd have to talk to somebody to be able to speak to it more knowledgeably, but essentially what's so interesting, and this is a 4-page document, okay? So I mean, I just basically included the cover page so you guys could take a look at it and see what it consists of. Let me click it and see if I can get through. Okay, yeah, so It's like a 4-page document just basically talking about the current state of consumer demand. And again, like, this is a time period in gaming where I have to admit I'm incredibly nostalgic, not just because I grew up in it and have memories of that, but because I don't think there was a time in history where the game industry was more volatile, where it was more of like a dog pile, of like, everybody jump in there and see, see who, comes out with the bacon or whatever. It was literally like one of those situations where, companies were game developing houses were still small. They were taking a lot of risks. Sega was doing a lot of risky stuff. A lot of new technologies were being developed, and a lot of like jargon was being thrown around that, it was a lot of hype. Nowadays, of course, there's a lot. The game industry has been demystified. Most game consoles are basically glorified computers, and we pretty much know what they're capable of. And we've got people like John Linneman doing breakdowns of the performance and stuff like that. And it's like, with the internet, nothing's really, everything kind of gets demystified by some YouTuber or something like that. But back then, it was like companies could really get away with this, like creating hype that didn't necessarily, live up to itself, and you'd get game magazines basically saying, like, you've heard the hype or you've heard the news. Now let's see, where the chips fall, in terms of like, how good Saturn is. I have several magazines that use that kind of rhetoric. But anyway,
yeah, I seem to remember for the PlayStation 2 or something, a lot of pre-rendered stuff that got passed off as that generations of graphics, and then the marketing kind of got a lot more optimistic than the actual gameplay you'd see.
Absolutely. I mean, this was like, first of all, you had Games Press bagging on 2D games. If it was a 2D game, it was like, forget it. Almost overnight, Virtua Fighter comes out in the arcade. People see polygons in motion and stuff like that, interactive polygons in motion, and I guess arguably Argonaut and Nintendo got the ball rolling with Star Fox, on a home console. But it's like people got a taste for 3D polygons, and then it was like overnight, just the reception for 2D games was just so lukewarm. And it almost would be like they would punish games in reviews just for being 2D, So it was like a lot of these developers had to kind of like learn overnight how to make 3D games. And it's like everybody was new to it, and there was definitely no rules, It's like people were coming at it from different perspectives, using different techniques to create 3D graphics, and there weren't any rules. So it was just like, let's see who does it best first, and Nintendo, they just kind of sat out and continued to work in private, and then they just used the power of their name and the Ultra 64 thing, to kind of like create that kind of hype. But yeah, no, this was a crazy time, it was a really crazy time in gaming, and there were so many players. The market couldn't sustain that for that long, but there were so many players. Anyway, coming back to this whole consumer demand thing, I just wanted to say that I think it's funny that, Sega is talking like they know what the consumer demand is, and then they turn around and they launch a system early. I think, first of all, Tom Kalinske knew that that's not... The consumer demand was, give us good support for the consoles that we already bought, like 32X, for example, if you're going to do that. And then also release the Saturn when you said you were going to, instead of pulling this stuff. Of course, Tom did not want to do that. He didn't want to launch the Saturn early, but his hands were forced. So, but you had this interesting...
So whose decision was that?
Well, Sega, it was Hayao Nakayama from Sega of Japan. They just basically said, you don't have a choice. This is not your... And because that's the thing, at that point, at the point that the Saturn came out and was doing so well in Japan, the power kind of shifted back to Sega of Japan, and they said, okay, well, Genesis didn't do, or Mega Drive didn't do well here at all, compared to Nintendo. And, you may have done great at winning the market in the US, but you did it at the expense of running us into a deficit, like a pretty bad deficit. And which was a part of Tom Kalinski's plan all along. You know, it was a part of his plan to win over the market, get a huge install base, and then work from there. And you'd work back that deficit. But that was just not jiving with the Japanese, business axiom. So basically, they kind of took over control and they said, no, you're gonna launch this early so that we can get it out ahead of PlayStation. But that did more to upset folks, developers, and and stores than it did to and consumers were just like, oh yeah, okay, it's out, but we didn't even know about it. So, I mean, again, this is that's another weird thing. It's like when they're making that announcement at E3, they're announcing it to the press. So then the press has to turn around and put it in a magazine that's not gonna, it's not gonna issue for another month, So it's like the public doesn't find out about it until far after the fact. They talk about their astronomical marketing. Astronomical, that is a word, yeah? Okay, it just doesn't roll off the tongue. $50 million budget, 30 million of which they spent on that commercial that Goodby and Silverstein did. So they had like a $50 million advertising budget, and they used like 30 million of it to create that Theater of the Eye campaign, which they talk about here, and they talk about the printed stuff. It's out there. You guys have any thoughts on the advertising for Saturn?
I mean, I actually didn't see any advertising for Saturn at the time that it was advertising. I wasn't aware of the Saturn until well after the fact.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So
Totally.
They didn't do a very good job at marketing it, because it's not like I didn't have TV.
Yeah. Everybody watching, by the way, we're Saturn fans, okay? We love the Saturn, but that doesn't mean that that we're not pragmatists. We're realistic about like how much they messed up, That doesn't, I hate it when people say, like, when they hear me going hard on Saturn, they're like, oh, what kind of Saturn fan are you? And I'm just like, I'm just being realistic, I mean, we grew up we grew up in that time period. We were going to high school, or I don't know, I guess you're a little younger than I am, but either way, it's like I didn't hear about the Saturn until 96. And I mean, it came out in Japan in 94, so,
Yeah, so the first time I heard of a Sega Saturn, it was like the one guy in the neighborhood that owned one, and he literally only played football games. So I think this would have been like 98 or something like that. So he was already a little bit behind. Yeah. And I bought my Dreamcast at like either 99 or 2000 or something like that, before Sonic Adventure 2 came out, but after Sonic Adventure 1.
Huh. Yeah. I have to admit, I didn't know a single person who owned a Saturn until after it was discontinued. I would say there was a guy, so I was going to this regional technical institute, and I was doing like 3D Studio Max and Maya, like 3D design and stuff. And this guy who I sat next to in the class, he was like a Photoshop guy. And he was getting an Xbox. This is what I remember, is he was so hyped for buying a new Xbox. So that's the timeline, is the Xbox was just about to come out, and he was going to like wait in line for it and everything. And he let me borrow a bunch of his Saturn games because he didn't care that much anymore about his Saturn. So he let me borrow like Sonic R, which I thought was complete ass when I first played it. And now, of course, my tune has changed. Like, I love that game, but I thought it was complete ass when I played it. And yeah, he let me borrow a couple.
Into liking it.
I'm sorry?
You've tricked yourself into liking it. Those controls are terrible.
That's debatable. You're playing it wrong. That's all I can say. No, you're from a glance or passing observer, I would say that the controls do appear to be terrible. But yeah, no, there's a lot to learn about that game, and you can actually, if you play it differently and you go off the course a lot and you drift off the course, instead of trying to make those really tight turns and just kind of get frustrated with it, you actually just allow yourself to drift off course and go through like the little villages and stuff like that, and do a lot of jumping, which Sonic can do, that little boing boing jump. You can actually get quite good at the game, and you'll end up seeing that it's about more of like the kind of race platforming and like finding all the hidden stuff, than it really is about being a kart racer or anything like that. But this isn't a Sonic R show. I just want to mention that at a passing glance, though, yeah, Sonic R. Like I said, I thought the game was ass. Okay, so I had the same opinion that most people did. But yeah, so for the
if I could just time travel a little bit again and just go right back to 97, 98.
Yeah.
If I took an unofficial, unscientific poll of the neighborhood, there's 3 PlayStation kids, a couple N64 kids, and one teenager with a Sega Saturn who was 5 or 6 years my senior or something like that.
Yeah.
Who only used it for the sports games.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember seeing any saturation in suburban Florida, which is my unscientific sample area at the time. But obviously the sales figures kind of reflect that the younger kids are great with the N64 because Pokemon had just come out and Pokemon Stadium was there, and then obviously Zelda and stuff like that. And I don't think there was an American-centric killer app the same way that PlayStation had Final Fantasy and N64 had Pokemon, and obviously Mario Kart. But for the younger kids, I think Pokemon was what was selling Nintendo at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was crazy.
There's nothing on the Saturn that's I need to go out of my way to buy this system to play this game.
Well, I mean,
the only games that come close are basically arcade games that take an hour to beat anyway, which is not a great thing for the parents to think about.
Exactly. Well, okay, so great point, and I would argue that for Sonic was that franchise that would have sold it in the US, because at that time it was still at the height of its popularity. Of course, Virtua Fighter was phenomenal in Japan. It did amazing in Japan, and it did sell almost 1-to-1 with the console.
Okay, yeah, but by the time we're talking about 97, right? Yeah. What aren't there other fighters already on the market that are?
Wait, no, we're not talking about 97. We're talking about 95 here, right? At the Saturn's launch. You're talking about selling.
Oh, yeah, 94, 95. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 95. So
when did Tekken and Dead or Alive come out?
Right. Dead or Alive came out in 96, I believe, late 96. Tekken came out probably late 95 or early 96. See, Tekken was an arcade game, but then it got ported. And I'm not somebody's got to correct me because I don't know the timelines on that stuff, but I just know that that's the big argument is that there wasn't a game to sell Saturn one-to-one, or a packing game that really sold the console, and it should have been a Sonic game. That's what the consumers wanted at the time. We didn't get. But what blows my mind is that Sega brags about having a $50 million advertising budget. And of course, they blew $30 million of it on that campaign. But I'm just wondering, what if they spent that entire $50 million on their own stock, right? On their own consoles, taking Saturn consoles and games, maybe like Panzer Dragoon, which was phenomenal as a launch game, and maybe a stall or maybe another 3D game. I don't know. Bug was pretty fun actually. It wasn't the best platformer, but I mean for back then, you got to put it in context. But you take a bunch of Saturns and you just stick them in college dorm rooms, or you stick them on trucks and drive them around and let kids play them. Imagine if they spent $50 million on that. Then kids would have known what a Saturn was, but instead they did these really, really crazy and obscure or avant-garde esoteric ad campaigns. And I mean, I love them now in hindsight, for what they are. They're so corny. But it's just crazy to think that they had that kind of money to throw around and they didn't use it for a more guerrilla campaign that kids would have actually resonated with. For all the good that it did, nobody knew. You didn't know about Saturn, I didn't know about Saturn. It was just crazy. Crazy.
So here's the thing, the internet. Well, actually, 94. I keep thinking in terms of 97, and 97 and 94 are different.
Yeah, 97. I mean, by 97, the Saturn was already failing. 97 was their Hail Mary year. They even said it at the beginning of 97. It was we're gonna have all these games come out. So in the timeline, 94, Saturn's out in Japan and it's doing amazing, right? Not May 95, Saturn's out in America and it trips at the start, trips off the blocks, gets going slowly. 95 is kind of a sparse year. 96 is an amazing year, sales-wise and games-wise. 96, a bunch of great software came out for Saturn. 97 was like we're failing, the PlayStation's obviously beating us, and we have to throw a Hail Mary here. They failed doing that, and then 98 was it's not our future year, and they just released a last few games, and then it petered out. They pulled the plug on it. So 98... Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt your point because I'm going to go in kind of a different direction, but Neo Z brings up a point, is that this, in 94, in the early 90s, I think throughout the entirety of the 90s, console sales are going to be driven by parents of children. Like kids, 25 and 30-year-olds are not yet going out of their way to purchase video games, and I don't think they're going to do that until the 360. So you're selling to the parents. I remember in around like the 96, 97 time frame, that's when I got my Genesis, which was a Christmas gift from my parents. And that would have been probably like $150 or $200 purchase at the time. So there's two things. The internet is not widespread, so you don't know what you're missing out unless the other kids in the neighborhood have it before you. Yeah. And if all the other kids in the neighborhood are in a similar socioeconomic strata as you, and your parents don't have money to buy a $400 console, but they do have money to buy a $150 console and a game or two,
right?
Then you have a Genesis, your neighbor has a Super Nintendo, his neighbor has a Genesis, and all of a sudden you guys are a generation behind with full libraries and no reason to pick up the Saturn. And the Saturn, for any console in this kind of environment, you need a long lifetime. Like the Genesis was around for how long? What, like 88 to
89,
to basically 90?
88. I thought it was like early 89, or maybe it was late 88, but all the way up till 97. They were putting out games for it because there was like NHL 97 on the Genesis.
So you for the environment where you don't have the internet, so you can't be like an annoying kid that says, "Hey, I want this thing because this is the new thing. I saw the commercial." These guys aren't running commercials on Cartoon Network, because I was on Cartoon Network. I was on Nickelodeon at the time. I didn't see crap about Saturn. I hardly saw anything about video games except for Nintendo. So they weren't marketing it to the kids. They were trying to get after the teenagers, which I think were less inclined to be interested in these games.
I mean, they admitted that. Yeah, they admitted that off the bat that they, like, their whole goal was to go after an older audience, and also they even talk about in the white paper, which we go down a ways to talk about the white paper, but they talk about the fact that the entire video gaming public had grown up, like the same kids that were the same, young teenagers that were playing their Genesis games, were playing like Mortal Kombat on the Genesis, were now much older and had their jobs and disposable income, and were going to be the ones that they thought would be buying the Saturn. Again, I just think that they just totally blew it on the advertising. Al Davis, it was his idea to put that tower of Genesis machines and CRTs in that strip mall, and have the public just kind of go play it and just go ape on all these Genesis and stuff like that, and allow the organic kind of like word of mouth to filter through. And it was like, what did they learn from that? Like they had all these great ideas advertising the Genesis, and then they did this with the Saturn, and it just was like, okay, you guys didn't learn from like all of your own successes. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. We got to move on though from the advertising and talk about. So this next article, this next is just the announcement. It's out there, 2 pages, and it's just talking about like, yeah, I know we said Saturn Day, but it's out there now. And as a result, here's the paltry library of games we have to offer you, basically. And Bug is listed.
So I don't know if I asked this yet, but what was the launch title for the PlayStation?
The launch deadline for the PlayStation?
No, the titles.
The launch titles for the PlayStation. Gosh, I think Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer.
Let me go look these up.
Please help me out, because I'm not at a keyboard where, I mean, I got my mouse here and I got the browser, but Toshinden.
It looks like they had a fair number of them, actually, like a decent selection.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, PlayStation was fine. It had a good impressive lineup for Jumping Flash. Was Jumping Flash? I can't remember if that was a launch game or not. But anyway, PlayStation, they just did almost everything different, than the way.
So they had multiple fighting games. They had a flight sim.
Yeah.
They had sports games. Multiple sports games, multiple racing games, and a platformer, Rayman.
Yep. Which
was 2D.
Now, and I've said this before, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you guys have to understand. Okay, so no, they didn't, do a complete board redesign at the last minute. People like to say that Sega went and bolted on a processor at the last minute. That's not how PCB layout works. I mean, everything has to work together. So, I mean, but yeah, no, they did get wind of PlayStation. They found out that PlayStation was going to go all in on 3D, that was going to be their primary focus. They weren't going to try to do the 3DO thing where they're like, well, it's a 2D console that does 3D. They're like, no, this is going to be a 3D console. And all of our games are going to be focused on 3D, and we're going to have really good software development kits, and there's going to be good quality software, 3D software at home. But when they found out about that, they were upset, they were frustrated, and they did kind of have to say, okay, well, we really need to make sure that Saturn can push 3D as well, so that's when they actually added the VDP 1 that would have been able that made it possible to render a bunch of texture sprites, basically warped sprites as polygons. And of course, there's Emerald knows, I mean, there's a lot that the Saturn is like a huge open box. Like if you know how to work the hardware, there's a lot you can get done there. But again, because they made that change, they had to scrap their documentation, their whatever tools they had to redesign the software development kits, and they had basically like a year to do that. They had from the time that they made those changes, they needed to turn around and create development tools. And they had to create new documentation on how everything was going to work together, this new setup. And of course, they just totally shot themselves in the foot because they didn't have enough time as a result. And then, of course, rushing the launch, it's like developers just did not have enough time because, again, it came out in '94 in Japan. So, they at least got it to market there. But it's like a lot of the newer developers were having to read all these poorly translated documents on the chips and try to figure out how all this was going to work. They didn't have a ready to use turnkey solution like Sony had built for their developers, so that was a big deal. That was a big reason why they needed to keep the Saturn on Saturn Day so that folks would have enough time to be able to work all the kinks out of their software.
Okay, there is one point I'd like to make, or maybe a couple points. So
right.
I just want to read off a list real quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in 1995, in the United States, the top 10 best-selling video games in this order were Donkey Kong Country, Mortal Kombat 3 Super Nintendo, Killer Instinct Super Nintendo, Mortal Kombat 3 Genesis, Donkey Kong Country 2 Super Nintendo, Mario World 2 Super Nintendo, Madden Genesis, NBA Jam Genesis and Super Nintendo, and Mortal Kombat 2 for the Genesis 2, as in a game that was at that point, I believe, 2 or 3 years old.
That was when the industry was hot for it was those pre-rendered 3D sprites,
Notice with two consoles launching here, and with the Christmas season, not a one of the 5th generation showed up in the top 10 list. Both the Saturn and the PlayStation launched too early. I would say, based off of this, just based off of my first impressions here, just that the PlayStation survived it better.
Right.
Which goes on to my second point, which is, along with those launch titles, the PlayStation actually had some Christmas releases, one of which being Suikoden. So they're covering every single genre that anyone could be interested in, including they got a couple RPGs in there. They have plenty of fighting games, sim games, racing games, action games, platformers. They have everything they need in that year. by the holiday launch season.
I wouldn't argue with you at all. I mean, in a nutshell, what you're saying then is that Nintendo made the right choice because they decided to debut their 3D hardware in 96. And again, 96 by 96, all platforms were making strong showings in terms of software. Developers were coming to grips with like what a 3D game should be, what a 3D platformer should be, or a 3D racer. And yeah, those early, 94 and 95 games, there are a lot of growing pains there. Even reviewers would say like, yeah, it's great, but I mean, there's a bunch of geometry clipping and stuff, weird, draw in and stuff like that going on. And it just doesn't seem, it seems like everybody's just kind of like learning as they go, And I mean, if Emerald's work and XL2's work is any indication, given enough time, you can polish something so much so that it even exceeds what professionals were doing. Given enough time, they just needed more time. And you're right. I think they did.
So I would say XL2 has definitely exceeded industry standard as of 97. Mm-hmm. I'm using his technology, but I'm still missing a lot of features because I don't know the hardware well enough. Mm-hmm. I would think that none of the demos that I've put out have actually matched the quality of most of the Saturn games. I think the closest I can aspire to would be like RoboPit, which is a good game, but also very, very simple to make compared to the other games.
It's pretty rudimentary. I don't even think it uses textured sprites, right? Or textured polys, right? It uses like Flash.
There's polys in there, but not on the characters, which is bizarre.
Well, I mean, your game competitions are a good analogy for. I mean, you've got deadlines, right? So if you're like, this game is going to be whatever it is by the time the Game Jam deadline is, or by the time the 27th annual contest, if you're dealing with deadlines, and of course they were, you just got to get it out. You got to ship it, and it's like, and then you get like discs that had code revisions because something got shipped out or something shipped with a bug, like what was it, In the Hunt, had like Croc. Yeah, Croc had that crazy and it only affected certain discs with certain machines, depending on like the BIOS that machine was running or what. It's crazy. But the same thing goes with In the Hunt. There was like boot issues on that disc, and that's not the only exception. But yeah, I mean, throw in some deadlines there, and all of a sudden, it's just only homebrewers have like infinite time, to be able to refine something like that, But moving along, because oh my god, like this is taking a lot longer than I thought to talk through.
This is the only thing we have to talk about today,
yeah, no,
right?
that's fine. So, I mean, I do have one other thing, but we can run over. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Webpage. They were advertising their webpage, and I think the most ironic part about this is that there is no URL on here. You're advertising that you have a web page to, I imagine, the press, and you've not included a URL for them to actually access. I can imagine it would have been like...
I thought that was packed in on the disc. I thought that was the point, was that you're supposed to open it on a computer or something.
Well, maybe this was a printed document. Simply click on your areas of interest. I think they're showing like the design for their web page, because this was back when they were using like image maps.
I bet you if you went to Sega.com in 1995, that's what you would have had.
Maybe. And it's possible because, of course, the Alexa crawls, they only go back to 96. And by the first, if you go to the Wayback Machine and you look at the first archive, it's looks totally different from this, but it's somehow similar. They are using like the image maps and stuff. And one item of interest that I thought was really interesting on here is this Sega Asylum. There's this dude in the bottom right hand corner who's like screaming, and it says the Sega Asylum. Now that
might be their BBS.
Sorry?
I imagine that would be their working name for the BBS at the time.
I suppose that's possible. I know. I did an interview with Ken Lowe, and he did a bunch of mock-ups for the Sega Underground, which was supposed to be kind of like a subscription club, that you would subscribe to, and you'd get demos, and you'd get like special magazines and stuff. And of course, Sony had the Sony Underground, and I think Sega canned that idea because maybe Sony got there first or something. But I wondered if this was like, had anything to do with that. Here's the thing. If you type in online, you type in the Sega Asylum, nothing comes up. And I mean, for this to be something that they put in a press kit, you imagine they're wanting people to write about this. They're saying, okay, this information goes live. Here you go. You know, and so like the press would get a hold of this. I cannot find any references to the Sega Asylum. So if you guys are watching this stream and you want to like share that out and help me detective that and get to the bottom of what the hell the Sega Asylum was, I would appreciate it. I have gone on the news groups, the old like Usenet groups, and I can't find anything there either. So that's kind of interesting. Moving right along, they talk about their launch games. Virtua Fighter, it's a 3-page document. Check it out. Just talks about, you know, Virtua Fighter and its success in Japan. Panzer Dragon, obviously, I think that's probably the most shining title of the launch lineup. It did, you know, yeah, it was a rail shooter, but I mean, I would say it was more different and unique and the music was amazing. It was probably the strongest title from the launch. Daytona USA, of course, still a fun game to play. Just a little messy in the graphics department, but Bug. Now, this is where the confusion comes with Bug, because Bug was intended to be a launch game. It was done by the one of the Tiger teams, which was like the Sega away team. It was supposed to be a launch game. It wasn't a launch game. It did not launch with the Saturn. Okay, so it didn't make the deadline of the Saturn's launch, but it was always intended to be. And David Warhol of Real Time Associates, he even says that they knew, they got wind early about the rushed launch. So it's like, it wasn't just like a last minute thing. Like they were told, be ready in May. Of course they weren't, but they made it within a month or two. But they were one of the games that was supposed to be a launch title, which is why I think people still kind of think of it as a launch title. But Nick Pandemonium has kind of, you know, set it in its proper place, you know, where it falls on the timeline. Clockwork Knight.
I mean, it's 96, isn't it?
A Bug?
Yeah.
No, 95. I believe it came out. So like I believe it came out in like June. You know, so Saturn launched in May of 95, and then I think it was like a month later. It kind of quietly made it onto store shelves, June or July, but 95. Clockwork Knight.
Okay, yeah, it's August 95.
Ultimate Sports
right.
Machine. They talk about, you know, it being the ultimate sports machine, and then of course the examples they give are like Daytona USA, which they already listed above. You know, they didn't really have any other. Oh, they had Pebble Beach. They had Pebble Beach Golf Links, which is a sports game. But I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Craig Stadler. How can you go wrong? But I mean, again,
System seller.
if you really do compare side by side the PlayStation's launch titles like you did and Saturn's, you know how much of a difference it would have made for them to wait and actually go with the planned launch, Saturn Day in September. You know, they brag about the hardware specs, and you know how many polys it can push on paper. I believe it. You know, I'll tell you what, I have talked to quite a few developers, some of which are actually still on NDA, and I can't say their names or what they worked on. All I can say is they're not allowed to talk publicly about this stuff because they're still under NDA. But they've basically said, you know, the Saturn is just kind of like a sandbox. If you are a programmer and you are good at assembly, or you're good at getting to grips with like certain chips and like doing like memory address adjustments and stuff like that. I mean, like it is kind of a sandbox with some limitations, some annoying limitations for sure that you have to work around. But I mean, you know, it's not like the PlayStation where like Naughty Dog had to like reverse engineer it in order to be able to break out of the cage that Sony had him in and basically like do some stuff that they wanted to do that they weren't supposed to do. Saturn is just kind of like, well, here's all the chips, you know, here's how they work together, you know, figure it out and have fun, you know. So I've talked to some really excited, some really good developers who were really excited about, you know, waxing poetic, I guess, about like those days of like working on the Saturn hardware, because it was just kind of new grounds. It was exciting. They were used to working with like, you know, all the 2D stuff on the Genesis and stuff like that. And so the Saturn was just like, it depended on your attitude. If you were just like, oh, this is fun, let's see how far we can push it, kind of like XL2, you know, And that's the way the lobotomy guys were. As in terms of a Western developer, they were one of the few developers that had a really good attitude about the hardware. A lot of other Western developers were just like, we want you to, spoon feed us. We want it to just be super easy,
I mean, so what was the dev kit for the PlayStation like? Saturn was transitioning into C from assembly on the Genesis.
Yeah. So David Warhol was one of those launch developers. They talked about how like their first thing, they built their entire engine from the ground up, and they used assembler, and they used assembly, and they didn't use a C compiler because there was a performance bottleneck. And then with their second game, Bug 2, they actually did go in and write a really good C compiler, and they transitioned the entire engine over to C. And it was doable, but again, you could always squeeze more performance out by going in assembly. It's just it took really long, and then it was harder to port, because it was just so niche. Whereas the PlayStation, first of all, the hardware just had built-in, on-off toggle switches, essentially, for like, okay, you want to enable this effect? Just check this box and you can enable transparencies, or you can enable Gorad shading on this object. It was just like hardware-based, built right into the SDK. It would be almost like using like an end user, from an end user experience, the developer would be able to create in there, much like you do in something like Joe Engine, I would say, almost. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but I mean, or even like Unity or something. There was just so many more tools, and again, I'm talking from a layman's perspective because I'm not like Emerald. I'm not a developer of any kind. I know some Python and stuff like that, but I don't make games or anything like that. But I can honestly say from what I've heard and the folks that I've talked to is that PlayStation was just much easier, and it didn't require any knowledge of assembly or hardly any at all. You could literally code games in C or C++,
Wait, I don't think they had C++ on the PlayStation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of PlayStation 2. I was thinking of PlayStation 2 with that.
That one I buy.
But no, you're right. Sorry. But for PlayStation, it was C.
Sega had a different mindset at a time. Like their arcade people, I think, were all assembly people, and they're used to like wrestling with hardware. And I think that's what they based their expectations on.
That's what I'm talking about. Like this time being such a volatile time in video games, everything was moving so fast. There were like if you weren't paying attention, you would miss something. Like and that's where it's kind of funny because so you're absolutely right. It was nothing new for a programmer to design a game in assembly. That's what they would do on the Genesis. What happened was there was just a lot of new games were becoming bigger. The industry was becoming bigger. It was making more money, and so game productions needed to become bigger, which means that developing houses needed to bring on larger staffs in order to be able to make these games, because the games were becoming more complex. So it wasn't like a 1 or 2 man project anymore. It was like 10 people or maybe 20 people. And as these development houses would bring on new people, well, a lot of these people were young. They didn't have good assembly chops, so they needed like kind of dummy software or dummy development kits for them to be able to like get up and running really fast, get stuff going really, really fast. And that's one of the brilliant things that Sony did. Probably one of the most brilliant thing that they did is say, we're going to make a system that is super easy to develop a game on and get something that looks decent going. And they really made it. Sony really did make game development more accessible, I would say, and easier to do. But at the same time, they created like a scenario where it was like a lot of third parties didn't want to have to put in that extra work that would normally be, par for the course. It would just be expected. But at this point, they were like, well, here are my choices. I can wrestle with this hardware and I could create some really cool stuff, but it would take, a longer time to turn it around, and then it's got a lower install base, and I might not even make my money. Or, we can go with this super easy console with like this, these already built out development tools, and we can create something that is going to have a huge install base, and will, the PlayStation from a developer standpoint made sense from so many angles,
Well, I would say that Microsoft is probably the one that did the best job at making the developers' lives easier.
No
if
kidding.
I recall correctly.
Oh, I mean, well, because they had DirectX, right?
DirectX and XBA support, I think, directly on the original Xbox, right?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, even by the time, so you're not wrong. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the Xbox probably was one of the easiest consoles. I mean, even the Dreamcast, for that matter, was way easier to develop for than the Saturn. But
the Dreamcast was Windows CE, and like the chips I think were supposed to be.
You had the option.
Compatible.
You had the option to go that route. Windows CE was an embedded option, but a lot of programmers didn't use it at all. A lot of programmers used Sega's proprietary engines and proprietary graphics libraries. But if you decided to go the CE route, you could create a game that was easily ported, so for example, Soldier of Fortune, it's a PC game, right? They were able to easily port it over to Dreamcast using the CE, the embedded CE. Of course, there is a level of performance degradation, by going the CE route. From what I understand, Sega's proprietary libraries run faster on the Dreamcast than the embedded CE, but at least it's an easy path. So you'd get a lot of games that could be easily ported, and Half-Life was an example of that, of a game that used the embedded CE and didn't see completion. But I mean,
I thought the Half-Life game was fully ported, just not released.
Well, it wasn't released because they weren't hitting their performance goals. Like it was really chugging. It was a really low frame rate, And I mean, I imagine that folks could probably get it working even better with some finesse, some time and finesse. But yeah, that was essentially that was it. Is that you had to take a lot of these PC games and kind of like lower the settings, in order to get them to run good on Dreamcast. But essentially, they'd be almost quick and dirty to port over to Dreamcast. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry, I was reading the comments. TechSpeak glossary. This is just funny that it exists. So again, they're informing the press. Here's the words you can use in your articles to talk about our stuff. Code processors and MPEG.
Oh, they're trying to sell the MPEG already.
MPEG, yeah, MIPS. You get the MIPS, which was millions of interactions per second, right?
Yeah, that's what you say when you can't say flops because you don't have a floating point.
Floating point operation, yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a really long document. You guys should check it out just for giggles. I mean, because some of the terminology on here is like obsolete, or at least it's just but it's just funny. They're teaching the press how to use all these new terms. Back then, you wouldn't take any of this for granted. I mean, now it's funny because we take all this for granted, but back then it was like a lot of this was people learning about this stuff for the first time. Saturn Starfleet. So yeah, they're talking about like the different tools that were available. Alias, Cross Products, SNASM. Of course, Psygnosis developed their own kit, which had like a C compiler and a cart on the top. You had the cart dev units. You had those big Sophia systems. So they're just talking about like all of their development products that were available at different price points. They talk about the third parties that they had on board. And I don't believe that every single one of these actually ended up shipping games. Let's see.
How many of those got scared off by the time they hit Dreamcast?
Right. So Absolute doesn't ring a bell. Acclaim, got it. Yeah, they did a lot of... Acclaim they were the kings of cheap. I always joke about how Acclaim would use... Acclaim would use just the cheapest print production. They would use cheap inks that fade over time. They would use cheap paper that oxidizes and turns yellow. they'd use cheap little plastic inserts for the US long boxes. They were like those bubble blister things that they could just basically shit out, so an Acclaim release whenever you see one in terms of Saturn long boxes, because they're just so cheap. But they save money, so that's what happens when you're cheap.
What I don't get is that they cut off like 3/4 of the library, but they let as much shovelware through as they did. Yeah. Like we didn't get Grandia, but we got Crow.
There are so many choices. There are so many things that happen that just make me go, what is going on? I don't know. I can't tell you why. I can't explain it. American Technos, American Laser Games. Oh, that's like the Mad Dog McCree. American Laser Games. They did Crime Patrol, which never got released on the Saturn. Yeah, Crystal Dynamics, of course. Huge on 3DO and did some stuff. Data East, Digital Pictures, of course. Digital Pictures with all of those FMV games.
Wait, Disney was making titles?
Disney. Maybe it was like. Was that
just like the Mickey Mouse Donald Duck port?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, these are all the people that. Again, you have to understand. This is kind of Sega bragging. That's what this is. It's a sheet saying, "Look at all the people we have in our stable." Yeah, a lot of these people were like held over from the Genesis, So yeah, Disney was huge on the Genesis. It's not like every one of these names were actually like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make games for you." They're just like using they're basically name dropping and saying, "This is who we have." Of course, like a lot of these people would actually jump ship and go work for Sony, because cheaper.
I mean, Philips at this time is making CDI, right? Like, are they going to be making games for the competition?
Yeah, I don't know. Where do you see Philips? Philips.
Under
oh yeah,
P?
Philips. Okay. I don't know. It's possible that like Burn Cycle was going to be released on the site. Maybe they had some ports planned. Maybe they're like, "Oh, our CDI is failing miserably. Maybe we can make some of our money by porting some of the software over to Saturn." I don't know. Out there with the away team, they talk about the away team. Read this document, guys. Check it out. It's cool. It's a good insight. They had like 6 different Tiger teams. David Warhol calls them Tiger teams. That's the term that they use. But then when it came to actually publishing the games, they called it the away teams. Real Time Associates was one of those development houses. It was referred to as the Sega away team. But yeah, they had these teams that would come in and they'd like wine and dine them, and they'd have them to the Sega headquarters. They show them everything behind the curtain, and they'd say, "Okay, you guys are going to be a part of our launch lineup. You're the chosen few." And Real Time Associates was one of those with Bug, where they are technically like a third party, but they're brought into the fold, so to speak. So they're kind of like a second party, I guess you could say. Nobody really talks about second party developers, but I guess it's kind of like Retro Studios with Nintendo, how they have such a close partnership. Defining the next generation. Sega Saturn, defining the next generation. This right here is the infamous white paper, which does, it's so much braggadocio. It's how many pages? It's just like 14 pages of bragging, which is, it's funny. I guess it's funnier when you consider hindsight, like how wrong they were about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, they're talking about like, we did a podcast episode about this. So if you guys want more information on this, we actually like read through the entire white paper, in season 1, I think it was. It was either season 1 or season 2. We did a whole podcast episode about the white paper, and we read through it, and we kind of mystery science theatered it, I guess you could say. We kind of lampooned it, or toasted, roasted it, I guess. You guys could check that out. But artwork request form, and that rounds out the whole document with you could mail in. I'm sure this doesn't work anymore, but you could mail in and request artwork for your publication, which would be amazing if I could get my hands on some of the artwork that they had. But I imagine if you were like official Sega Saturn magazine or something like that, yeah, you could fill this in and you could say, yeah, send me everything you have for Bug or Panzer Dragoon. I'm going to do a huge expose or something like that. Well, thank you very much, Peter Malik, for spending your own hard-earned money on this and scanning all of these in 600 DPI and putting them up for the internet to enjoy in perpetuity. We appreciate that. And moving on to another, this middle one I think is just talking about the show that we did last week. But moving on, I'm gonna try to make this short and sweet because we're already over time. If you guys aren't aware of Twitch, this not the modern streaming platform, but the old TV show. It was on a cable news network called Intro Television. Did you ever watch this back in the day, Emerald?
No.
Okay. Have you watched any of these episodes?
I'm literally hearing about this for the first time right now.
All right, good. Well, that means maybe other people are hearing about it for the first time. So there's a YouTube user who goes by the name Zyrule, and it literally is youtube.com/Zyrule, Zyrule, who back in April started uploading these episodes of this show called Twitch. This was a video game news and review show that was just dripping with that 90s edgy MTV grunge aesthetic and cool kids reading from teleprompters. I would say that this would inform and lay the groundwork for future shows like X-Play or Attack of the Show, but I mean, it was like ahead of its time. In the UK, you had Bad Influence. That was another show you had that I would say would be comparable. But anyway, this was an American show. It was done by a guy named Monty Miranda, who he directed this and kind of like designed the whole aesthetic and vibe at the age of 26. And he teamed up with a guy named Brendan Horan for production. And they had a local Denver, Colorado band, because this was a Denver show out of Denver. A local Colorado band called Jux County, who did the 90s alternative theme music. Well, so yeah, fast forward to 2021, and you got this guy on YouTube, Zyrule, who essentially, he was a kid who recorded this show on VHS, and he recorded all 21 episodes. And the cool thing about this show from the get-go is that it's incredibly Saturn friendly. Like, it was early enough in the Saturn's life that they hadn't passed judgment on the console yet. You know, it still was quite viable. And, you know, they have plenty of 3DO and PlayStation coverage as well, and a little bit of 32X sprinkled in there. But there's a hell of a lot of Saturn coverage in this show. And so Pat kind of joked a few shows back. He was like, you know, when he's finally finished uploading all of the episodes, it would be nice if we did like a master Saturn cut where you just literally did all of the Saturn related content. And so I took him up on that, and I put together our own Saturn cut of all 21 episodes. So if you watch this, it literally is like, let's see, 2 hours and 43 minutes of retro Saturn content, you know, reviews. They're talking about Netlink. They're talking about the backup cartridge. They're talking about the steering wheel. They're talking about like the Eclipse pads, like third-party peripherals. They're reviewing the games. It's awesome. So if you have like 3 hours to just sit back and watch some retro Saturn content, I highly recommend you guys check out this Saturn cut. And then, of course, if you like this, every single bit of footage that you see here came from Zyrule. So all credit to Zyrule for preserving this game history, you know, capturing everything on VHS and then uploading it for everyone to enjoy over this past summer. It's been amazing. Every Sunday he would upload a new episode. So huge shouts and love to Zyrule. He's linked several places in this article, and there is a Twitch playlist that you can go to here where you can see in their entirety all episodes. And now, if you watch the unedited episodes, you're going to get everything. You're going to get 3DO. You're going to get no Nintendo 64, because I think this show ended right before the 64 launch, but you have a lot of PlayStation reviews, 3DO, Saturn, 32X, Genesis. There's even Genesis and SNES in here. So it was a great, fun show, and there's a lot to enjoy there. And I also included Monty Miranda's YouTube account as well as the IMDb for the show and Jux County's Bandcamp page. But yeah, so so anyway, yeah, who doesn't? Sega Retro View is like, who doesn't have 3 hours for the best? I that's I agree. Anyway, so Emerald, I highly recommend you check it out.
I might. So I'm just curious. When did Tech TV launch?
Tech TV. I mean, I could Google it. I don't know. You're talking about G4? Yeah, G4 Tech TV?
Oh, Tech TV was before the G4 merger.
Oh, right. No, Tech TV. You're right. So Tech.
It was 98. So yeah, this is way earlier than that.
Yeah, and now, did the Computer Chronicles have anything to do with Tech TV, or were they completely unaffiliated?
I have no idea what the Computer Chronicles are.
You're kidding, right? You don't know who okay, you got to check out the Computer Chronicles. You totally dig it. If you go back on the Internet Archive, look up Computer Chronicles with Stuart Chaffee. There was a show that premiered in like the early 80s and went all the way to like the late 90s or maybe even early 2000s, talking about Macs, PCs, graphics cards, everything. I mean, it was just...
This sounds a lot like Lazy Game Reviews, except actually current for its time.
The current for its time. Lazy Game Review. Oh, you're talking about like Clint? Wait, Lazy Game? Yeah, LGR.
LGR.
Yeah. Clint. I guess the Computer Chronicles is very similar to Tech TV. Tech TV, I think they were both really polished shows. They were professional shows, produced in a studio, with high profile guests coming on to talk about stuff. They had people from Apple. I don't think they ever had Steve Jobs, but they had, folks from Apple. They had folks from IBM and Intel. But yeah, you definitely check it out. This is, very similar to that. I would say this is more like X-Play. This is like the 90s, mid 90s version of, what X-Play would become. And then of course, X-Play, they had like two hosts, that would kind of banter off of each other. Which was kind of a new thing that they did. With this, it was just quick cuts to like a different host reading from a teleprompter, and it was always really corny and very edgy and had a lot of attitude to it. So I mean, if you're if you like that kind of thing, then it's definitely worth your time. If you don't, then maybe it's for somebody else. But either way, it is important because of game history preservation. There's a ton of codes, a bunch of tips. Somebody even said the other day, they were like, I've owned Panzer Dragoon. I've owned the original Panzer Dragoon for its entire life, and I didn't know that there was a level 0. And that's one of the things they tell you, is how they tell you how to enter a certain button combination to access level 0, so that you can basically it's like a practice level. They did an interview with Dave Perry. They did I don't remember which episode it was, but you guys can scroll through and figure it out. They did an interview with the Bygone Dogs, which was Sega's label artist. Sega had their own music label for a second there, and they wanted to like try to make their own music for games, and so they had an interview with the Bygone Dogs, who did the soundtrack for Cyber Speedway, in addition to the title track for Gen War. So there's a lot of really deep cuts in these videos, so you guys should check it out. But yeah, that's this whole show. I really have much time for show and tell. I guess I could. I'll show you guys my latest pickup. A little while ago, we did a pinball episode on the podcast, and this was one of those games that I was pleasantly surprised with, Pinball Graffiti. It's not the best pinball game on the Saturn, but it is it's like a fully 3D engine pinball game, and I had a lot of fun with it. I'm sorry?
Part of the case got keyed out.
I know the green. Yeah, part of the ramp is green there, so it gets keyed out. But anyway, it is a good game. I like it. Sega Lord X even gave it a fair review. He said it was much more enjoyable than he expected it to be. I also have another item here that I was going to show folks. It's my Police Knots that Ben Boyd did for me. One of my prized Saturn possessions, and inside it comes with two It comes with like the game and then some extra content. There's like a poster in there. Pretty cool stuff. This is my attempt at trying to do what Pat does with all of his weird Saturn peripherals. I got like all of the Sega Flash demos to go with my here. I can take the browser down so you guys can see. If you guys happen to collect Sega Saturn magazine, you know that they came with demos. The green one's getting keyed out here. But yeah, so these are all the Sega Flash demos and my Panzer Dragoon demo, housed in this nice little Sega Flash case. You guys can get one of these. Ben Boyd, who he goes by Radcheck in our Discord, and then he's also on Facebook. You can just find him as Ben Boyd, but he makes these, and I think they're nice to have. And then the last thing I was going to show you guys is this, my VR Temjin. Let me see if I can hold it back here. It's from Virtual on Cyber Troopers. It's like the character, the little action figure. But I have not opened it. It's still completely boxed, never opened. Has the seal on the back, like the Japanese game store seal, and it'll probably stay that way because it's just kind of like a display piece. Yeah. Whoa. But with I guess it's time to say thank you to all of our patrons. Thanks for all 22 of you watching the chat and sharing it out. I'm gonna go through and list off our patrons, and we've got Emerald Nova, who happened to join us on the stream. Thank you, Emerald. C Win. We got Derek Pescarella, or A Team, Ian Keg, Ivar Wernerholm, Johannes Fetz, Super Dimension Sentry Orgus, Tanuki Trev, Young Money Sweden, Mamdu Madar. I can never say your last name, Mamdu. Memphis, we all call you. Private Eye, Humanoid 70, Alexander Miranda, Luis Viant, Anthony Randazzo, Knight of Dragon, Nikita Sokolov, Shadow Mask. Thanks, Shadow Mask. Tectonic Improv, Tom McComb, Man of Stone 17, Faux Macho, Craig Jolly, Rab Mac, Joe Sega RPG Fan, Jeremy Roots, Ricardo Mello, Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean, Barry Finlayson, Retrospectors, shouts to Retrospectors, Jesse Hurley, and Rowan Dinked. I think I said that right, Dinked. Thanks every single one of you for contributing, for supporting us financially. We really appreciate your support. I can't believe that there's that many of you guys who wants to support us, but we are humbled by your support, and we love having you guys in our Discord and talking to you all. So
Dave, on the note of support, can I just make one last quick more point?
Absolutely.
This is not a SHIRO thing. This is I think our tentative team name right now is Team Starlane or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So Xenos and I are doing a quick push this weekend to try and submit for Retro Platform Jam number 3. Now, I didn't actually properly read the rules. I don't know how exactly this works, but we will be trying to submit a playable demo of Blue Skies ahead of the Saturn competition for this game jam for this Sunday. So I don't know if people can come in and vote for us. Go look up the Retro Platform Jam number 3. It's on itch.io. It's like the first thing that pops up on Google. If there is a way for people to vote for us, I would appreciate some support. I mean, don't spam their Discord or anything like that. But on that note, because we are submitting there should be a playable demo sometime this weekend for Blue Sky. If anyone wants to load that up, it's just going to be like a basic flight simulator. It's supposed to be like a Pilot Wings soft port or something like that. Xenos can talk about it more. But I'm just saying that now, one, because on the off chance they let the random community members vote, I would like some votes. And two, now that I'm saying it out loud, I basically have to get this done.
There you go. That's a good you're giving yourself a deadline there. I mean, you already had a deadline, but now you really have to Put your money where your mouth is. So yeah, no. Could you tell folks what that URL was again?
It's just search for Retro Platform Jam #3, and the very first thing that pops up on Google is that itch.io link.
Okay. Retro Platform
I'll put it
Jam.
in the Discord.
Yeah, and maybe stick a link in the live chat would be great. So yeah.
You can't do links in live chat.
Oh, you can't do links in live chat. Even if you spell it out .com.
Yeah, just Retro Platform Jam 3.
Got it.
And the first itch.io link you see should be the first link you see. That's it. If there's a way for people to vote for us, I would appreciate some votes. I don't know how it works. I didn't really read the rules. I just saw that they would accept our entry, so I ended up just deciding we're going to do that.
That sounds great. Okay, awesome. I'm excited.
At the very minimum, you guys should get a plain game this weekend.
Yeah, of questionable quality. No,
exactly.
But hey, you know, you guys are pioneers. You're making it happen. I'm sure that it'll be more polished by the game competition. But no, that's cool. I'm glad. So retrojam.com, I believe, is the URL.
No. It's just crap. Now I already forgot.
I'm sorry. NeoZ was putting it in. Yeah. Just look up Retro Game Jam 3.
Yeah, Retro Platform Jam 3. Just look for that. You'll find it. And if you can vote, do vote. If you can't vote, then just download the game, I guess.
Sounds good. Vote. Don't definitely vote. If you download the game, then vote.
I don't know that voting is open to the general public, but we'll find out.
Okay, well, if you can vote, do. For sure. Okay, cool. And I'm getting like I don't know why, but I'm getting like an echo coming in. Anyway, okay, well, with that said, I'm gonna roll credits, and thank you everybody for joining us for this kind of running long Shiro show where I kind of had to fly solo, but we all miss Pat, and we look forward to seeing him next week. We're gonna probably do something for Halloween or something, I don't know. But until next time, just remind you all to play your Sega Saturns and join us in the Discord for some lively Saturn conversation over the week. And peace out.